Got it. Oh. Oh, you have to do it.
So the recording started, yeah.
Yes. Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the North Sydney Local Planning Panel. This afternoon, we've convened to consider just one matter, and that is in respect of a planning proposal for 183 to 185 Military Road, Neutral Bay. The process this afternoon is we'll be hearing from any submitters, objectors who wish to make a submission, and then we'll be hearing from the applicant and his or her team. I would just like to briefly state right at the very beginning that as a planning proposal, this panel is only charged with making a recommendation to the council as opposed to a determination. And I think you're all probably aware of that. So we will just be making a recommendation to the council, and the panel has all inspected the site individually, and so we are aware of its context. And we also are aware that there's been some 30 submissions received in respect of the matter, even though it is very much in its embryonic stages. There's been no public exhibition as such yet. That would only occur if, in fact, it received gateway, and then there would be a draft plan that would be then placed on public exhibition. But at this point in time, it has not been through any formal public exhibition, and it's just very much the beginning of the process. I would just like to briefly introduce the panel to you, and then we will hear from submitters. I will say that there is one submitter who has given us a written submission as of yesterday, and he will not be appearing, but we have noted that submission. So thank you for that. And I'll just introduce myself first. I'm Jan Morrill, I'm chair of the panel, and I have been a town planner for some 40 odd years. And since retirement in the Land and Environment Court, where I was a commissioner for 14 years, I sit on independent planning panels at both the state and local government level, and act as chair or an expert member. Thank you very much. Lindsay Day.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm Council's community representative on the panel. I'm also a town planner with almost as many years as Jan in terms of career. I had my own micro business, Lindsay Day Planning. I have a range of private clients. Most of my career has been in local government. I think I've currently been on 14 different councils, either staff or contractor, and I'm on this panel and 8 other local planning panels. The others are as an expert. I'm also council's representative on the Sydney North Planning Panel. Thank you.
Oh, good afternoon. Lloyd Graham is my name. My background is in town planning and also economic research. Most of my career was in Western Australia on the town planning department. Then I transitioned to the Land Environment Court over there, dealing with planning appeals. Here in New South Wales, I've been on several planning panels, and I run my own business dealing with matters in metropolitan Sydney and also rural New South Wales. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Grant Christmas. I'm a solicitor who specialises in planning and environment law. In addition to practising in the Land and Environment Court, I also sit on a number of local planning panels, and I'm the state representative, one of the state representatives on the Sydney Region planning panel.
Thank you very much. So I will just like to allow the submitters to make their submissions, and we will be making our report with a recommendation to the council by close of business on Friday. So thank you all very much for your time today, and I would like to invite Meredith Trevelyan-Jones to address the panel.
Good afternoon, panel members.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry, we just increased the sound.
Okay.
Can you speak?
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you
Now?
speak again? And I'm not on mute, so it
Hang on,
should
we'll
be.
just,
Is that a bit better?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Meredith, so I think it's a problem with the room.
Thank you.
That might be better.
can you speak now?
Can you hear me now?
No, it's still fine.
Should be able to use a microphone or
You can hear us, can't you?
Yes.
Oh, it doesn't seem to be, it's the volumes are all. Can someone else speak, please?
Yeah, just saying we can hear okay.
It must be.
I think it's the room.
Yeah, I can hear her okay too.
What about the top one where it says test speaker and there's a drop down?
I can hear Meredith plain and clear.
Can you speak now?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can.
Also,
Jen, you got it? All good now. Is that
Okay,
does that
thank you. I'm
enough?
very sorry for that. That wasn't creative sabotage or anything like that. You
I'm
won't-
sure.
you
I'm
won't
sure.
do it as part of your time for your submission at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, panel members. I'm addressing you on behalf of Willoughby Bay Precinct. I would also add that I'm the convener of the Neutral Bay and Cremorne Progress Association. I have a good understanding of the proposal for the adjacent Woolworths site, and I'm very aware of local residents' concerns. First up, I would like to acknowledge the contribution of the Andrews family, who own this site, to the Neutral Bay Village. The family runs an established business from Andrews House, which is on this site, and therefore a local employer. The family also has a history of contributing ideas in terms of revitalising Neutral Bay. Nick Andrews, who established the business, was part of a business group which funded an urban planning study which recommended that council underground the car park on the northern side of Military Road and create a public plaza. This planning proposal indicates it will incorporate 3 office floors, and this is a welcome change from multiple recent development proposals which have resulted in loss of office space. So the proponent is to be commended for this. On the other side of the ledger, Willoughby Bay Precinct endorses comments by the strategic planner. Firstly, proposed height is grossly excessive and would be visually dominant and out of character with the area, and it would also result in unacceptable overshadowing. Secondly, as shown on page 30 of the report, this proposal, together with the adjoining proposal, present as was said, a decidedly suboptimal urban outcome in terms of the public plaza. There is considerable community support for a public open space in this area, but for a design which delivers a more public and high amenity space. The deletion of the travellators on the Woolworths site and the opening up of the plaza would enable activation of its northern frontage, that is on this side, and provide opportunities for pedestrian links through to Military Lane and Military Road. Thirdly, surveys by council indicate a community preference that the Neutral Bay Community Centre remains on the northern side of Military Road. The current facility is considerably larger than 323 square metres, so that's the current community centre. It's larger than the 323 square metres proposed in the VPA and is already seen as undersized. In my view, it's unlikely that council could afford to staff 2 community centres, and I believe a community facility in this location is problematic. Willoughby Bay Precinct supports the recommendation. I've actually missed some stuff here, so I don't know. Supports the recommendation that the planning proposal not be supported to proceed to a gateway determination. The planner's report on page 8 says the proponent attended a pre-lodgement meeting and council officers recommended that the applicant recommence negotiations with Woolworths to achieve a coordinated design outcome. Having attended several meetings with Woolworths, I can imagine that negotiations would have been difficult. I would suggest that in the event council does not support the planning proposal proceeding to a gateway determination, that the applicant may wish to continue to discuss with council officers and have discussions with community groups with respect to achieving a public domain outcome with the greatest benefits for the community and also the applicant in the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Meredith. I'll just see if the panel members have any questions.
Yes, I was going to ask you regarding height, whether you've given any thought to the sort of maximum height that you would support.
Well, I would say the community generally is strongly in favour of retaining the existing village atmosphere, and that anything over 6 stories would be problematic in terms of the community. I'm aware that the rezoning review for the Woolworths site has led to a recommendation that that proposal proceed to a gateway determination. I'm also aware that the Neutral Bay Town Centre planning study is currently underway, and this issue of height is very much one that is a key issue. Council officers have talked about effectively swapping additional height for public benefits. The public benefits that are being proposed in this case unfortunately seem to be fairly minor. There's a little corner of the site sort of opening up towards the rather narrow and constricted Woolworths Plaza, and a community centre that, as I said, is problematic. So I couldn't support anything more than 6 stories.
Thank you for that. And I failed to mention earlier that we, like yourselves, have the benefit of the council officers' assessments report, and that is a benefit to both the applicant and submitters. So I'd just like to publicly recognise their hard work there. I also have Peter Moore, who has joined us online. As I understand it, Peter, you sent us a submission, which we have all had the benefit of reading, but you're more than welcome to address the panel. You're on mute, Peter, if you could just take yourself off mute. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't think I was going to make it back, but I could read through what I'm not a strong public speaker, so I prefer just to read through what I've submitted already with a few other comments, if that's okay.
Yes, could I just say that you don't need to read it in full, but if you can just, because we've all read it, so if you can just summarise it, and it is on council's website. Yes, thank you.
I'm representing as the chairperson of our building directly opposite Military Road, planning proposal and the Woolworths site at 4 Rangers Road. Yeah, we're very concerned about the excessive height and built form of this building. We think that the overshadowing impacts, the impact of the public and private domain and the traffic impacts will be very unsatisfactory to our residents. One of the stated objectives, one of the stated key objectives and intended outcomes of the planning proposal as described by the proponent is to support the village atmosphere of the Neutral Bay Town Centre. We believe that a 12-storey mixed development on this side would largely destroy any village atmosphere in Neutral Bay, and it creates a strong precedent for similar future developments in the area. The planning proposal is accompanied by an indicative concept design with a 3D artist impression of the proposed design prepared by AJC, It's on page 5 of the Strategic Planners Report, and it is again on page 40 of the AJC Urban Design Report. I particularly want to mention that this 3D pictorial shows a much needed generous setback of the building's frontage to Military Road and at the corner of Military Road and Rangers Road. The public plaza shown between the proposed Woolworths development is very generous and very attractive, and could be supplemented, we believe, to great public advantage by partial or complete closure of that part of Rangers Road between Yeo Street and Military Road, which is not much use for thoroughfare, mainly used by shoppers looking for parking spots to go to Woolworths. The large public domains that's shown in the original MRCPS and in this urban design report would be a very attractive and much needed addition to public domain in Neutral Bay, and we wholeheartedly support the proposed footprint of the planning proposal, and we commend the proponent for this inclusion in their proposal. Nevertheless, the scale and bulk of the proposed development is completely unacceptable to me, to many of us. In my written submission, I made various comments about the traffic. Those of us who live here are very conscious of the fact that Rangers Road, Yeo Street and Military Road are virtually at capacity. And in the traffic report that accompanies the proposal, there is no reference to the combined impact of both the Woolworths development and the Military Road development. The two combined are going to make Yeo Street virtually impossible at some times of the day. There's no acknowledgement in that traffic report that between Warringah Expressway and Spit Junction, there are only 3 places that traffic travelling east along Military Road can turn right off Military Road, namely Watson, Spofford and Belmont, and all inwards traffic to these 2 sites travelling along Military Road must enter via Watson and then Yeo. There's no reference in the traffic report to the existence of the large Neutral Bay Public School or the Redlands School in Rangers Road and the significant congestion that occurs during school time zones, nor does the assessment mention the daycare centre, the synagogue, the church or the fire and rescue station in Yeo Street. Yeo Street and Rangers Road are narrow suburban streets already under considerable pressure. We expect considerable disruption to traffic along Yeo Street in the vicinity of the access points to the 2 sites. And given the rather dubious and spurious claims and conclusions made in the traffic report commissioned by the applicant, we hope that Council will give it little consideration in the determination of the planning proposal and will take into account the significant traffic congestion that already exists in Watson and Yeo, in Rangers and Military. With the Woolworths proposal for Rangers Road and this Equibuild proposal, there's a great opportunity for a combined development that delivers very substantial opportunities, very substantial benefits to the community. It'd be a great tragedy if Woolworths and Equibuild could not get together and come up with a proposal that everybody found acceptable. Unfortunately, there appears to be very little long-term or vision or foresight, long-term planning, and we wonder what all this continual development will have on traffic and congestion in 20, 25 years. Or is the making a profit now far more important than what's going to happen to our community and our cities in 20 or 25 years? There's a lot of talk about built form and preserving the village-like atmosphere. By continual excessive development and pushing more and more people into our already overcrowded community and the cities, the built form and village-like atmosphere will be irrelevant compared to the overcrowding and traffic congestion. The only positive I can see in all of this is that in 25 years, I'll not be around to see what mess it's made of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I'm glad that you could take the opportunity to present to the panel in person. Now, there's nobody else on the line that wishes to make a submission. I'll just check before I move to the applicant's team. No, very well. So we will now move to the applicant's team. And I have on my schedule of those wishing to address the panel, Tony Polvier. Is he here? Oh, you're on it under a different name.
Yes, my apologies. My
Okay.
apologies for that.
One moment, thank you. And I also have Duncan Corrigal. Duncan, the architect from AJC, is that right?
That's correct, yeah. Architect and urban designer on behalf of Equity Build.
Thank you. And also I have Harry Andrews from Equity Build.
Yes, hello.
Thank you. Now, I'm in your hands as to how you wish to address the panel. So, Tony, do you wish to go first, or Duncan?
Thank you, Chairperson. I would go first. Excuse me, I've got a little bit caught in my throat for some reason. But thank you, panel members, for your time today and for the opportunity to hear from those who have lodged submissions. I was very pleased to hear some very positive comments in regard to both this proposal and the Woolworths proposal, and that was very much appreciated. Mr. Andrews will not be presenting, but is here to address any specific questions the panel may wish to directly ask of him, particularly in relation to any ongoing discussions with Woolworths in the past, now, or in the future. Look, I'll keep my comments to the strategic merit of this proposal, and Mr. Corrigal will follow me and he will address the site-specific merits of the proposal, if we may.
Yes.
The planning proposal document for the subject site that you have in front of you provides a significant amount of detailed justification for why this proposal has strategic merit. So I don't propose to restate all this information and go through it all again, but I would like to highlight a few things. As the panel would undoubtedly be aware, and as has been mentioned previously, I'm sure, part of the strategic planning to guide change and future development in the Neutral Bay Town Centre, North Sydney Council prepared the Military Road Corridor Planning Study, having regard to providing certainty, delivering improved built form outcomes, function and accessibility for the Neutral Bay Town Centre. This study envisaged increases in height on 3 amalgamated sites within the town centre, where new community facilities and public domain projects could be delivered. One of these 3 amalgamated sites included the 12-storey redevelopment on this subject site, along with 6 to 8 stories on the adjoining Woolworths site. But as we all know, unfortunately, this study was rescinded by the current council. Notwithstanding, and as been mentioned by the previous submission, Woolworths proceeded to lodge a planning proposal for their site with a Part 7 and Part 8 storey redevelopment with around 1,000 square metres of public plaza. Council notified Woolworths it would not support the planning proposal. The Woolworths proposal has subsequently been the subject of a recent rezoning review by the Strategic Planning Panel of the Sydney North Planning Panel. This review was primarily tasked with assessing the planning proposal and making a recommendation on whether the proposal had both a strategic merit and site-specific merit. The panel recommended the planning proposal should be submitted for a gateway determination because the proposal demonstrated strategic merit and, subject to changes, site-specific merit. The changes included reducing the proposed height limits to 6 and 8 stories, so there'd be more in accordance with the recommendations of the Military Road Corridor Planning Study. The panel unanimously decided the proposal had strategic merit, given that the proposal is consistent with the, and this is a quote from the report from the panel. The proposal is consistent with applicable strategic planning documents, particularly as they relate to the general objectives for housing. Delivering housing supply is a priority issue for Sydney for all levels of government. And the previously endorsed, though rescinded, Military Road Corridor Planning Study and current work to revise the Neutral Bay Town Centre Strategic Plan and Study provide a clear indication of the council's and community's desire to revitalise and renew Neutral Bay Town Centre. I would also add that there is a significant strategic merit around providing housing on transport hubs. This proposal will provide for an increase in housing directly on the B-Line bus service, that is a turn up and go service now operating 7 days a week and running from 6:30 a.m. until 12:30 a.m. The panel also then agreed that the Woolworths proposal also demonstrated site-specific merit. What I would like to say is that, like the amended Woolworths proposal, this proposal is proposing to deliver increased housing and redevelopment of an identified strategic site in the Neutral Bay Town Centre, in keeping with the provisions of the Military Road Corridor Planning Study. And like the amended Woolworths planning proposal being assessed to have strategic merit, the rezoning of this site in accordance with the provisions of the Military Road Corridor Planning Study will also deliver strategic merit as the Woolworths proposal. Mr. Corrigal from AJC Architects will explain how this proposal adequately addresses issues in relation to site-specific merit, and this will centre obviously around bulk, scale, height. Given Woolworths are now primed to deliver their part of the Military Road Corridor Planning Study on this key site in the Neutral Bay Town Centre, I would suggest to the panel it would be in the community interest for council to work closely with the proponent to deliver the remaining part of this unique opportunity before it's lost to future development in accord with the existing approved DA for the site. I'd like to now hand over to our architect, Mr. Corrigal, who will touch on the site-specific merits of the proposal. Duncan?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Just any questions from the panel for Tony before I shoot into the next bit?
I think we might just hold our questions till we've heard your address as well, Duncan. Thank you.
That's great. And then sort of 10 minutes, okay? I was given sort of a 2 to 20 minute range, so I can do a number of presentations depending on our timing.
Now, Will, we're certainly here to hear from you, and you know, if you can. And we've read all the documentation, so we have seen all of the work that AJC has done as well. So if you could just limit it to about 10 minutes would be fine. And we've still got Mr. Andrews on.
We do, yeah, he's still.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, fine, that's okay. It's just that you're not shown on my screen. Have you got the participants?
Yeah, he's not showing.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much, Duncan.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks to the community members here as well, representatives for speaking. Obviously, Andrew's group is Harry Andrews and his family, a big local family. And I must say, I grew up in the area and went to Neutral Bay Public School. So I understand the kind of the balance of what development means, which is always, of course, more than there is today. So, you know, I look at Neutral Bay now with 3 times as many students and the demountables all over it. And I certainly understand the difficulty in having these conversations. So I'll put some slides together, so I'll share screen just to kind of take you through, and I'll just, not full screen or anything, just so I can draw a little bit, and feel free to interrupt if there's any questions. I just wanted to kind of run through the site-specific stuff and give some of the context, because this was submitted in November last year, so there's been a bit of change in the kind of the delay in getting to the panel, not in the proposal, but more in the context. So I just sort of wanted to share some of that.
Thank you.
You can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm.
Great. So the proposal is very simple, because effectively the planning study mentioned, we've just sort of taken it and brought the outcomes identified for the equity bill site and put a planning proposal to try and provide them. The context is important though, because there's a lot of talk about combining this development with Woolworths. Equity Build worked in a combination with Woolworths for many years. They did extensive documentation. One of the reasons why they've split is really because the planning study was retracted. So don't want to speak for another client, but obviously if you're looking at a development and they're very time constrained, Woolworths, in getting something off the ground, taking the tower component out certainly sort of changes the conversation. So where we're coming from is that the tower component is actually critical for the benefit of the scheme. So that plaza is significantly impacted if no development happens on this site. So there's a number of things that the corridor strategy identified for site-specific merit that can't happen without this site being included. So really the design is a 12-story building on the corner of the plaza. And what we've tried to aim to do is take that future direction study and do equal or better to in every component. And I'll take you through each component as to why. When it comes down to it, obviously urban design reports and the like have in Woolworths and this proposal have a very wide range of documentation in what they're actually saying. Just for everyone's benefit, all of that is just reference. So what you actually come down to in a planning proposal is very different to a development application. And it's just these two maps is where it really is the rubber hits the road. So what the planning proposal is asking to proceed to Gateway, which is another 18 months of review and revisions, is to increase the minimum non-residential FSR for the site, effectively maintaining the jobs in the area, which obviously Equity Build are very firm on, as was the corridor study, and increasing height to allow that 12-story building. The 12-story building, just picking up some of the review, just standard floor to floors. There's nothing crazy about it. The 43 metre includes the lift overrun. We've allowed 3.2 metres for residential floor to floors due to some changes in building legislation in the last couple of years, and then 3.8 for the office and community levels and 4.2 for the ground. Talk a little later as we do. There's a few things we could do on the podium. We sort of think there are better approaches than a 2-story, but equally it could just go straight and just provide exactly on council's recommendation. That all happens after Gateway. So you can have all those conversations at, and council have a lot of drive in what they want at that kind of DCP level. The DCP level, obviously we didn't propose a DCP, we just said we'll do one if the project proceeds. We're expecting the DCP would just be council's planning study. So that is a 12-story building. You can add a story control if 12 stories is the right one. A 2.5 metre ground floor setback along Military Road, the full 2.5, not the 2 metres, sort of raising the assessment. The solar access to facades or access to public domain, this was shown in the studies, it doesn't differ from council's review, so we're expecting the overshadowing will be largely identical. The parking location is identical to the corridor study, and the sort of one difference in the massing is just whether we have a 2-story podium or a 3-story podium. And really, that's just a discussion we can have. There's not a yield thing. It was an urban design response to the surroundings, but it can drop to 2 stories. The site-specific public benefits are raised in the strategy. Really, what we've done there is, it's listed as 14 secured commuter bicycle spaces on the Equity Build site. So we've provided that. The community centre is noted in the Woolworths development, actually, in the other side. Now, in reviewing the Woolworths planning proposal, we saw that community facility was not provided. So we proposed bringing it up to the other site. The area of that is really a negotiation between the landowner and council. We've provided area for at least 1,000 square meters. You could do multiple floors. It really just comes down to what council wants, whether they really do want to move over here, and what Equity Build is in the position to provide. That VPA is a balance. So obviously, since 2011 has been a change in government. The focus on VPAs and the like is really on affordable housing and the like now. So that's effectively a whole negotiation that happens again after Gateway. That really doesn't need to be an issue immediately sort of off the back. As some sort of other context, the existing building on site includes those 2 sort of small shop top. It's actually just shops. There's nothing on top. It's just a false front. And then a 3-story office building with ground floor retail. There's an approved development application for a 6-story building on the site. It builds all the way to all of its site boundaries effectively. So it has none of that kind of plaza or approach. And then critically, it's going to provide a long blank wall straight on the plaza. So that 6-story building is going to overshadow the plaza that's now got Gateway approval, and it's going to sort of close it off with a blank wall. A lot of which is the reason why you would have seen in the Woolworths proposal, there's a lot of trying to hide that wall, which keeps on shrinking the plaza. The other sort of context that's changed since November 2011 is that Gateway approval, or recommendation of Gateway approval of the Woolworths development. Like I said, disconnected from this, sort of through no fault of anyone really. But it's going through with 2/3 of the scheme, not the whole scheme. So this is the sort of SNPs, excuse the resolution, we just don't have the real copy, but you've got an 8-story building at a 33-metre height limit, and then a 6-story bar. So you can see it's consistent rise. 33 meters is a pretty tall 8 stories. It's only 10 meters lower than we're proposing for a 12-meter building next door. And then you can see that little bar there is trying to deal with the development application, which is shown. They've modeled the approved development application there. What that means is that you get a pretty narrow plaza and it doesn't front onto Military Road, which, it is partly identified in the corridor strategy, but doesn't seem like the best outcome to us. So when we come to the proposal for this site, we just took that equal to or better than approach. And the immediate better than seemed to be pulling the building off the shared boundary with the public square. Now we're assuming that public square is going to have an easement, so we can come in here. Council did point out that they don't want us to rely on that. So effectively what we've got here is a position the bike parking in the entrance to the upstairs, community office, whatever arrangement it is. So you could come in and you could enter and you can access everything without using the plaza. Realistically, a retail development is going to want active frontage on their plaza. So, we expect that there would certainly be an access easement to allow, but again, that's the sort of detail thing that happens in a far off stage. Woolworths provided a pretty good example of what this is. So this was the original planning proposal that went in, and then they've shown the same splay and sort of discussions with Equity Build to show the benefit of sort of opening it up. And now they've got they've got some travelators there, or some escalators there, which may or may not occur. But you can see that the difference in the plaza is pretty obvious, made more obvious by the 3D. So again, these are by KTA, but this is what the plaza was based on not combining, and this is what the plaza is if we can remove the existing building and splay it on. So there's it's a big difference in quality and space. Overshadowing as well. So on the right here, that's the overshadowing of the existing DA. And you can see effectively from 12 o'clock, it's more than 50% overshadowed. We get an extra couple of hours and then only just 50% at 2 p.m. So effectively you get that lunchtime solar. And all that is despite the height, it's pulling the line back. So we're taking that area and putting it on top and getting a wider and a sunnier plaza. The other big one for us is the transport improvements. So what we've shown here is the 2.5, not 2, but 2.5 meter setback to the bus stops. Drawn a little beeline there. This is what it is today. Everyone will know catching a bus here is really traumatic in the morning because you get double lines of people, and then you can't get a pram, you can't get a wheelchair through. The design that we've shown and that council proposed is taking 2.5 meters, effectively almost doubling the footpath there. Council have shown trees or asked for trees, so we've shown trees along here. Not actually necessarily appropriate just because of the need for people, but we did want to be as consistent with the corridor strategy as we could. And then that sort of $1 million issue is what we get out of that. So we get a better plaza and a wider street front, which requires changes to built form. So we need to demolish a building. We need to reduce the amount of built area on sort of the footprint of that building. So what that means is it goes up. Again, we've just taken that 12-story approach and we've repeated it in the design. So really the only difference in the design is taking that little volume out and giving it back to the plaza. In terms of neighborhood feel, I do want to flag that the area is full of towers, point towers surrounded by mid-rise. So it's not like you're bringing in a tower form for the first time in a neighborhood of housing. These are the immediate ones surrounding. This is me standing on my brother's street the other day, and you can see the skyline looking over here is just filled with point towers along the whole side. So the village characters aren't actually destroyed by the occasional point tower in it. And when you're getting this kind of the offsetting strategic and site merit, this is the type of thing you want. You want towers where there's an open space, where there's public transport, where there's a neighborhood center to identify that that's there. The other thing, sort of the only other change really was picking that 3-story street wall. Again, we're thinking that probably the corridor strategy said 2 stories because the existing buildings are nominally 2 stories, but the height 3. So we just showed a 3-story volume. Again, that's a DCP control. So if council's view is that no, we want 2-story volume, what we'll probably do is we'll just sort of show no yield there, and we'll just show a frame or something, just so that we can have the kind of the urban design outcome that we want, and then turn an offer on depending on council's preference for a 2 or a 3-story podium. We do think that happens well after Gateway. Again, we'll try and take it out of the yield discussion and just keep it to a DCP discussion later on. And then overshadowing, you can see here, this is the development that's actually this is a smaller development to what's now Gateway approved. This is based on the sort of brown shadow there is based on the corridor strategy. And then we've just shown the tower to show what's the tower adding. And effectively it's adding 9 AM shadows and a sliver of 10. And then for the rest of the day, it's fully contained in the shadows of the other. Now that's changed actually. It's sort of the shadowing's worsened, but the shadowing caused by the tower is reduced because the Woolworths Gateway approval, those 6 stories are much higher than a regular 6-story building, so there will be significantly more overshadowing. Again, doesn't really affect this proposal because this proposal was largely contained already. Similarly, this is just sort of on council feedback. There's an office building to the south. Woolworths have said they want to change it to some residential floors above, just to check that you can do a residential development. The display helps, the orientation helps, and there are ways of getting at least 70% solar on that northern facade. So just in summary, the design aim was to tick all here. So that's the Military Road Corridor planning study. List of requirements on the left or desires, and we just said, you know, the ability to meet is there for all of them, meet or exceed really. So we've got new housing at a rapid public transport node. We've got waiting and circulation space where there is none currently at the rapid B line. Again, that B line has 2 stops in between here and the sort of the spit. So like it's a bus rapid transit. It's where housing should be, and which is where people should be. We've got that active transport support of on-site public bike parking, which would be a VPA offer. We're expanding job potential 4 times the existing non-residential FSR, so much more than you're getting from that kind of DA or a standard DA approach. Expanding the public plaza and opening it to Military Road and improving its solar access. And to our view, we're providing a building height that is appropriate to that local context. And that local context is point towers interspersed around low and mid-rise. And it's positioning it where, of all places, a point tower should be supportable, as opposed to, you know, effectively just a tower next to a building that has no other reason to sort of accentuate. And that's me at 12 minutes, sorry. But
No, that
that's
was
sort of open for discussion.
very useful, Duncan. Just if I can just say one thing, when you said the council's strategy for Military Road, it's really council's rescinded strategy. As I understand it, their new strategy will be considered later in the year and exhibited early next year. In terms of the timeframes, but I hear what you say. Just in terms of FSR for the commercial, non-residential, what sort of FSR are you contemplating in the proposal you put forward?
Well, we're doing the minimum non-FSR of 2 to 1, and then how much it actually, so which is, you know, 2,600 square meters, but how much it is depends on that community component. Which obviously sort of we can allow for something, but it really does depend on that VPA.
And then my next question is then the FSR for residential. I'm having a bit of difficulty when we're just asking for height, and I know there is some dimensions in terms of your 2.5 metre of additional setback off Military Road and other factors of setbacks, but you know, without an FSR to then have regard to all of the constraints in terms of overshadowing, as you pointed out, and everything else, you know, it's a bit of a blanket to require you know, the height proposed at 12 metres without some understanding of what the nuances are to give the required constraints considered in the context of the site and its immediate area.
Certainly. So the FSR is effectively total 5 to 1. Now, if Mr. Andrews and Equity build it, we're sort of looking at probably more non-residential FSR there because they're a sort of a business that wants to maintain that commercial. So the reference scheme with 1,000 square meters of community is a 2.6 non-resi and 2.4 resi. Just want to caveat that the proposal is a minimum 2 to 1 though, so you could have up to 3 to 1 residential FSR in that footprint were an FSR control to be added.
Right, okay, so would that then allow for having regard to the constraints of the site and the need for greater setbacks to retain solar access and all that sort of thing?
It does. So that's based on the reference design we've done. So that everything you've just seen, those are where those numbers come from.
So I'm just trying to think in terms of a DCP requirement. You could have quite a specific envelope for the site.
You could certainly, we could do tend to try and stay away from envelope controls unless there's very particular. We would normally suggest a solar control, so a sort of a solar plane or something to sort of set hours of the day if the solar access to the plaza was required. But certainly you can do a setback requirement from every boundary, and you can even do a graphic showing an envelope and then put that into the DCP. And then effectively the future DA is required to be contained in it. I'm probably telling you how to suck eggs at the moment, but yes. Preference is no envelope controls, but the envelope control on this site would be fairly simple because it is a small site.
And the reference to the 12 stories, I'm just trying to understand how the 12 stories is consistent with council's current vision for Neutral Bay.
So I guess all we can do is refer to so council effectively doesn't have a vision because the rescinded study, which was endorsed at the time and was council official council policy, being retracted several years ago, and there hasn't been a sort of subsequent study. Obviously, we know local councils in particular are at greater mercy of politics than perhaps state councils in that regard. So, you do get that mid-rise push. So it probably 6 to 8 stories might be where it lands. But in terms of state planning priorities, right now it's increasing housing through height at transport. So it does fit within the strategic statewide policies of housing at these locations. So obviously the Northern Sydney Local Strategic Panel, the Sydney North District Panel, pointed out that the rescinded Military Road Corridor strategy was endorsed and was effectively a clear indication of the council's and community's desire to revitalise and renew Neutral Bay. So they still referred to it as, the stand-in for council's views at the time.
Well, we've now moved on. It is a rescinded study. That is the status of it. So we can't refer to the old study that's been rescinded. And I think in the resolution that council made to do the new study, there was some particular guidelines that were given. It wasn't just, we're going to throw the study out and start again, but there were reasons as such given, which provide some broad outline.
Certainly, I guess it comes down to that neighbourhood character comment. So obviously, we just know that the politics external to what was worded was really it was focusing on height. That was the sort of overall idea. Was 12 stories was shown at a number of locations around Neutral Bay, and we're concerned, so let's rescind the study. But the instruction or sort of the official advice was just maintain neighbourhood character. And when we look at these neighbourhoods and we see point towers of 24 stories, 10 stories, 14 stories, all within a very short walk from where we are, we don't see that this is out of neighbourhood character. So it remains consistent with neighbourhood character. Not to say it will not be prominent. It is a point tower on a prominent corner. It's just in our view, it's the appropriate. If there's anywhere appropriate for height in Neutral Bay, it's there.
Okay, I just want to drill down to when you said that 12 stories is appropriate. There's nothing in the immediate vicinity that equates to anything of such degree.
Yeah, there's sort of 14 stories just opposite. Well, not, I mean, it's not adjoining, but it's certainly the skyline. It will join a number of buildings of greater height. There's a few sketches which are just straight from the kind of a 3D model of Sydney, and it's the very tight view we've taken to show those towers.
Yeah. Okay. So then I suppose a 12-story building, and then you'd have 3 stories of non-residential, as I understand it, and that includes the ground, does it, Duncan?
It's 4 stories, including the ground of the podium currently.
Yep. Okay. So, has there been any consideration then to, and I know this is a planning proposal, but nonetheless, it's tied up very much with your justification for housing. But has there been any consideration of a component of affordable housing?
I'd have to leave that to Tony and Harry to talk about, because it really does come down to a VPA offer. From an urban design standpoint, I would love it to all be affordable housing. It just doesn't make a difference from a massing and scale.
I'm not suggesting that at all, but okay, right here.
No, sorry, I was just trying to pass to Tony there. Wasn't trying to shut down the question.
No, that's okay. All right, I'll hand over to other panel members.
Well, I just have one question about the beeline. So the bus stop out the front, that's a beeline stop, is it?
Yeah, I think there's 4 bus stops. One of them or 2 of them are beeline stops.
Yeah.
Directly outside.
Yeah, I've been on the beeline heading to from the North Beaches into the city, and I'm not saying it wasn't a sky, I just hadn't noticed it before. So I do know it's sort of a pinch point there. But I also noticed this morning how popular the bus stop was, so it was something that jumped out at me. That's fine. I can check that. Thank you.
Okay, and Lindsay?
Just a couple of things. I'm wondering if you're able to throw some light on the loss or gain of commercial space. There's nothing in the documentation, the report on page 33, I think, identifies that it is discussed, and it's I'm just interested to know is there a loss, is there a gain?
So we're seeking to, we just don't have a GFA figure of the existing, but seeking to replace. So yeah, to 2,600. Harry might want to jump in to say if it's the commercial intent is to replace the commercial space.
Harry?
Look, our focus at the onset when we started this design process with council and in fact our neighbours, Woolworths, back in 2016, was to increase commercial office space and other commercial space for the purpose of trying to bolster the daytime economy and the vibrancy of Neutral Bay. As has been mentioned by Tony and Duncan, that focus, that priority has changed a little. So I think probably the more appropriate place to resolve that question, answer that question, is through the VPA negotiation process. I understand that the provision of housing is perhaps a higher priority than commercial office space, but I think that could, our business would always seek to balance that with a healthy amount of commercial office space, for the reason that that's what's required for the vibrancy of the area. Neutral Bay at the moment becomes a ghost town during the day because all the residents leave and go to the CBDs. We think that can change a little bit. It's not to compete with a CBD, but so I would say that at the current commercial office space would be the nominal amount of square meterage. We would probably increase that.
And I guess I just add that it's effectively 4 times the existing requirement, and it's about 0.25 higher than the approved DA for the site. So the expectation is, there'd be more out of the rezoning than there would otherwise in the case of a redevelopment.
Yeah. Do you know the existing commercial floor space on the site now?
I don't, just because getting from NLA to GFA is difficult. But it's about 2 to 1 is the estimate, just drawing a box over the box and doing a 3-story assumption.
And the other one is just talking about the impact of the wind on a tower of 12 stories and so on the site. There isn't any wind impact study submitted with the planning proposal at this stage. And I just wondered if you had some thoughts to share with the panel about wind impact.
So no, we haven't done a wind impact study. Obviously there's the curved corners and the fact that you're splaying open the plaza is an attempt to reduce wind versus if it was a narrow plaza that might increase it. But there's no formal impact study done for it. We've just sort of leaned on council had done a lot of work to get to those heights. So the understanding of you're going to have to ameliorate the issue using building form. But obviously there are always wind shear effects caused by height changes, whether it's 1 to 6 stories or 6 to 12 stories.
And last, the green travel plan is in this council report has sort of been criticised as being inadequate. And I guess I'm just taking up one of the parts of the green travel plan is it's supposed to provide 68 bicycle spaces, and it's certainly well short of that. I'm just wondering if you've got any thoughts or comments on that particular.
The 68 refers to private, and the numbers given refer to public. So that would be for the users of the tenancies, basically. So that could certainly happen in a scheme in the basement. You'd effectively, imagine that the DCP requirements for other buildings of the type would also come here. Council really pushed us to consider lower parking than the maximums allowed in North Sydney. So that's where the transport engineers taken their instruction from, really. So they're saying, even with the increase in density, we think there'd be less parking than currently approved for the approved DA on site, has been their standpoint.
Right. I mean, that's car parking. I'm talking about bicycle parking facilities which aren't indicated in the
Yeah,
plan.
absolutely. We haven't, just because it's a planning proposal, not a DA, we sort of haven't done basement layouts that distribute, storage cages, basement parking, on-site tanks and the like. So it's sort of how, the green transport plan done for a DA level will establish how many bicycle spaces. You wouldn't particularly expect there to be more or less required for this project than other projects in the area. It'll just be set by the amount of square meters and the sort of transport availability on site.
Thank you.
Yes, look, I have to admit I'm curious as to why you would run with this planning proposal now, because council's policy is fairly clear that it only supports proposals that are consistent with its endorsed strategies. Now, there is a strategy on foot now, which it looks like it could be finalised by the middle of next year. So I'm just wondering, why would you run with this now?
A lot of it has been to sort of keep going with Woolworths. So that is going to be in the ground before you know it, sort of thing, because they're tied between the two supermarkets, with one closing and the other one not able to operate. So it's trying to make sure that when that plaza comes, it's not just an enclosed, locked out thing where this site can't contribute to it. Because after that, it's done. Once if they build a 2-story retail volume and the plaza's facing away and it's all sort of been run through the state, then this site is no longer part of that. So we're really back to the kind of DA approach of a blank wall, of a smaller plaza, a scheme that's overshadowing the plaza. So it's really, the timeline has been set by a couple of things. It's by Woolworths proceeding and having received Gateway, and the DA consent expiring next year as well.
Can I add something to that as well? And Harry, you might want to chip in here, but this has been going on for a long time, is one of the reasons. It is a timing issue. Also, I think from Harry's point of view, if it's not 12 stories, it's going to be the 6 stories that we've already got approved on the site. And council have made it quite clear that the 12 stories is not going to be supported. So if we're to proceed with a 12-story option, we have to lodge a planning proposal and go from there. So even if we wait, we're still not going to get 12 stories. We know that. And I believe Harry's position is it's either 12 stories or it really doesn't financially, commercially viable to go 10 or 9. It'll be the 6-story development, the residential development.
It seems that 12 stories is just not going to be under consideration.
No, not by as we believe, council are telling us it's not. But they said the same about the 8 stories next door.
If I may add, this is Harry Andrews. One thing that has perplexed me with where we're at the moment is that the people that are not happy with 12 stories, in my mind, have not been able to support a reasoning as to what is too high and what is too low. It's a very subjective argument that I've heard to date, and while I respect that and appreciate the community's opinion on that, I'm still perplexed, as in what is the correct height. The best I can see is that it has to be the result of the rather extensive analysis and reporting done by council itself a few years ago, which I believe was rescinded largely for political reasons. That's my opinion. You know, we had been working with our neighbours Woolworths between March 2019 and December 21. Basically we developed about 16 different design concepts, which both helped inform council with their strategic plan, but ultimately our plan was to submit a planning proposal. As we pointed out before, when that was rescinded in 2020, in March 2020, sorry, I think it was February 22 that it was rescinded. Woolworths, for reasons best known to them, concluded they needed to move forward, and we discontinued our commercial negotiations with them. And they set the queue thereafter. They went about and developed their own planning proposal. As Tony just mentioned, we could see the train was leaving, and in terms of the outcome, getting the right outcome. And we did have a pre-submission meeting with council and acknowledge that they did suggest to us to interact with our neighbours. And we've had several discussions and meetings with their representatives, the earliest being on the 21st of October 22 and the latest being around April 23, to discuss how we can incorporate our two schemes. And effectively, the two schemes as they appear now are very similar to the strategic plan. I did note with interest, council's report that's before you now seems to flip and flop between referring to the strategic plan in terms of metrics and comparing how our submission looks, and actually then stating that it's irrelevant, there's actually a new plan. So I hope you understand that we're operating in a bit of a vacuum of information and have been doing that since about 2016. I feel that our submission at the moment is a reasonable and responsible response to the strategic plan that took several years of council and community interaction up until a few years ago. And you know, we appreciate you guys taking the time to review it and the community to consider it. But much of the detailed design commentary that was provided in council's report before you now, most of it will be resolved in the next phase if council sees fit to support this. So matters of affordable living might be dealt with in the VPA. Amenities such as bike racks and the like would be dealt with in the DA.
Yeah, well, look, that's interesting information you've provided, but where are you now exactly with Woolworths?
Well, we have no commercial relationship with them. However, we seem to be on a direct dial with them. We got a phone call as soon as things progressed at their state planning review several weeks ago or a month ago. After our pre-planning proposal submission meeting with council, I did as council asked, and I met with their representatives, and the main topic of conversation was that two-story pavilion building was going to complicate things. And we said, well, look, we would think that if it's gone, the scheme can move forward, roughly in line with council's original intent. They did not change their design, but I note briefly that the consent conditions that they've got require it be removed. So we have a conversation with them. They're keen to understand how we progress now. My intention, very briefly, I've lived and worked in the area for I've worked in the area for 30 years. I have lived in the area for over 50 years, and the intention is to actually retain this building and have it function as a property that addresses what the community and people need. If not, it remains empty. So we would be designing something that both serves a purpose to the community, but also works in with council, because I think those two objectives are the same.
Okay, just change tack for a minute. With this VPA, there's a talk of a community facility of 323 square metres. That's 22 metres by 15. That's not very large, as opposed to 1,000 square metres that's talked about elsewhere in documentation. So why have you settled on something so small?
It's a good question. As Tony mentioned before, I do believe that's something that would be resolved in the VPA conversation. Several years ago, when we had about I think option 16 before North Sydney Council for the joint design, I recall distinctly one meeting where council officer said, well, look, we actually don't want floor space, we'd like a basketball court. And we spent a lot of time designing a basketball court in about 2 different locations. I refer to that only to emphasize that I think a lot more conversation should be had as to exactly what council and community want or need. If it's 1,000 square metres, there's capacity in the building. When we were talking about 1,000 square metres, it was part of the joint development with Woolworths, which is, I don't know, call it a 3 or 4 times larger building than our 12-storey building alone. So noting 300 odd square metres was just trying to make it proportionate to what our, call it 1/3 of the complete site number 3 provided. Council and community may turn around and say that they want daycare facility, which is a completely different requirement again, or may revert back to wanting a basketball court. So I understand what you're saying, and we're open for that conversation at the VPA stage.
Thank you. Look, I only have one more question. On page 6 of this document, there's a series of inconsistencies. I don't expect you to run through them, but they seem to be important, each of them. I just draw your attention to them because it doesn't look good when there are these inconsistencies. And just wonder why you've submitted documentation that has these in it, and it's something I think you just need to address.
I can just address it quickly, just because in a planning proposal, there's 2 ways of doing yield. Effectively, there's one way of doing yield. You take an average unit size based on an estimated mix and a size, and that spits out a number of units, but it's an Excel spreadsheet. When council's assessment officers referred to inconsistencies, they've counted the units on an indicative test fit, which is done for a different purpose that goes to, basically to show alignment with the ADG. So those inconsistencies were just 2 different methodologies for doing 2 things. We certainly can align them, so we probably will if this proceeds, just to take the question, just so it doesn't look odd. And then the only other, the 2 other inconsistencies raised was the traffic being 1 unit less. That was purely, it's a December, it was a slightly earlier document, and the test fit changed very mildly, and the conclusions don't change, so we just didn't go back and get the traffic report reissued as well. And then the community centre, as noted, we've allowed for 1,000 square metres in the envelope, but what happened after that was really the VPA just wasn't getting there based on a 12-storey building. So again, I don't know how that's going to pan out as we move forward. It might be simpler to take the community centre out of the discussion, or it might be that we, just note that note no area whatsoever, and just give it a general figure as non-residential, and then it sort of takes it out of the document. So there are reasons, but I can see why it would.
Just, yeah. But look, I'll leave those questions now. I had a few more, but I think we've covered the things that were really of importance to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
I was just looking at the issues that had been raised by the community. One that I don't think we've covered so far is the issue of traffic and the traffic studies, etc., that have been done. And I'd just like your comment on what you heard earlier.
So obviously the traffic report took council's advice and proposed a certain amount of parking that's under maximum, and effectively said the basic conclusion was there is an existing DA on site that shows more cars and more traffic being generated. This development is expected to cause less. So if the approved development was built, it would create more traffic than this development. And that's the sort of point they've taken. I think we've always got to disconnect this from the Woolworths development. So obviously the Woolworths development is the traffic driver. This is going to be, sprinkles on top. So it's a very tight site, and it's only going to be parking for itself. We really don't, given we don't have to build to maximums, you wouldn't really need to provide public parking because it's there's however many council want on Woolworths site, 90 additional spaces beyond DCP requirements on Woolworths site. That's more than the whole building. So basically council's wanting more extra parking next door than this entire development wants. So it's not a big part of it, but obviously traffic is the other one. Height and traffic are the two big community concerns on developments like this. And, I do hear you, I don't like sitting in traffic either.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now, if I can just go to, I guess, the sticking point is the 12 stories. And I guess I need to hear in terms of the viability from Harry in this regard. I think this particular site should have commercial, which is what you're proposing. I don't think it's something. North Sydney is contributing to its housing targets already, and I don't think that's going to be the thing that will get it over the line by any means. So I'm just trying to understand the 12 stories as opposed to the 6-story development you're doing, and why the viability of this has to be at 12 stories as opposed to, say, 10 stories or 8 stories.
That's a good question. I guess it's the $1 million question.
Multi-million-dollar question.
Perhaps stating the obvious. To determine viability, we have to have regard to the cost of construction. We have to have regard to what this end product can rent for or sell for, and we have to have regard to the cost of capital and all the competing elements amongst that. And in addition, though, unlike most development sites, we have the added duty to not just provide the statutory contributions that are clear, but there's now likely to be state contributions or ARC state contributions that are still not 100% clear, at least to me. And this negotiated piece, which is the voluntary planning agreement. And from memory, that figure is in the order of $7 million to provide something to the community that, again, adds to the cost of the project. So there is a conflict of demand on the resources here. One is how big can the building be and how many people can use it, and how much has to be spent to build that. 12 stories is, look, I've got to say it's somewhat arbitrary insofar as we've been dictated to by North Sydney's strategic plan from a few years ago that they spent several years devising and conferring with community. Obviously, we would, the higher the building can go, it comes at a cost and comes at a benefit to us. But we understand that there's a limit. You know, you can't build a 100-story tower there. Although interestingly, that seems possible when placed on top of a Sydney Metro station in other places in the municipality, such as on Pacific Highway. But in this case, we're capped, and we picked the 12 stories. Anything below that, and so our current balance, our current proposal has been formulated, including that early number in our VPA has been formulated on the 12 stories. If we go backwards from that, we have to go backwards and scale down the entire project, including what can be provided to the community. And the nominal position would be the existing development consent, which has some problems. It does not have scale. Other than its statutory contributions, it provides very little back to the community, but it complied and it's approved. And lastly, provides a big blank wall, perhaps, to the plaza for the approved scheme at Woolworths. So that's how we came to 12 stories.
No,
I'm still unclear as to the fundamental basis for the argument or the assertion that 12 stories is inappropriate. Because from my perspective, it seems subjective. I'm very happy to actually quantify where 12 stories comes from, if not just by reference to council's own strategic plan. But when I hear that 12 stories is not appropriate, it's too high, what is appropriate? 9 stories, 8, 7, 10.5 stories? I'm not sure.
oh, we can have the basketball court on top.
Yeah, that's an idea.
Okay, now I know it was a very difficult question, and but I just felt that it was useful in terms of the current approval, and then now what we're looking at in terms of the additional height plus community benefits. So, anybody else have any questions from the panel?
Sorry, can I just come back to the point I was making? I answered my own question that the B line indeed does stop out the front of the site. It got me thinking about the proposal to dedicate a 2.5 metre strip to, for I suppose, widening of the footpath. Is it proposed? I don't know whether the details, as you know, anyone's drilled the detail, but would an awning come up over the footpath that exists now, and there'd be an increased setback? How would that work?
What we've shown is the awning stops at the 2.5. So we would probably stop the awning and then it bends round to join the existing. You could do it in 10 ways though. You could have the awning fully separated from the building too, if we wanted. The reason it's done as it is that line of trees that council nominated in their strategy. They wanted trees along the street curb, which, as mentioned, wouldn't actually be what I would jump to in a rapid transport area. But we did want to be as consistent with the strategy as we could, including, as we've also spoken about, that 12 stories.
Yeah. But it is an important little spot there in terms of providing users of the buses, obviously the point that they get on, and obviously when they're standing there, they've got to be protected from the weather, and I think that's probably an important consideration.
I'm personally a very big fan of separated awnings, or effectively a freestanding structure over the bus stops would be fantastic for me. Yeah, that point. So the plaza is critical point number 1 for me, and number 2 is the bus stop. Like that area, Military Road is so horrible. It should be a main street, and so the approved DA just repeats the same thing: a 0 metre street wall all the way up. So as we get more and more people in this area, it's just going to be worse and worse. And no one's really talking about shrinking Military Road, which is what we should also be talking about. Instead, it's more about, how do we fit more cars onto Military Road for more of the day.
Thank you.
Just coming to this public benefits thing. There's a figure quoted of 6.4 million. Now, I take it from the wording in the report that this was nothing that was done in terms of professional advice to reach that figure, but it was an internal assessment that aims that figure. Could you just, because that's quite a lot of money, so can you just explain to me how that figure was reached?
I personally wrote that document and did confer with quantity surveyors in terms of trying to quantify construction cost. Other components of that VPA submission, such as the dedication of land on the Rangers Road, Military Road corner, we prepared a valuation of what that land is, and there's 3 or 4 ways one could value that land. Anyone who understands how valuers operate can understand there's quite a few approaches to it. We did that to provide a framework more so for the VPA, but the first, and I think it was noted there, we're the first to acknowledge that the quantum of those numbers should be validated, because another way of assessing valuation here is on social economic benefit, which is nothing of what I just mentioned. It's a completely different approach, and there are specialists that devise those numbers as well. Council would be more familiar with that than I am. But so it was a starting point, a conversation starter. I think it was more the scope that was important. And if council was to say, hey, that VPA scope should be something a little different, that too is if it is the basketball court, then that would change the numbers again. So I hope that in some way answers the approach we took, but also acknowledges that we do need to do a fair bit more.
Thank you.
Just one question is, with the approved 6-storey development there, is there, what is the setback to Military Road?
I believe it's 0. So it's just straight to the pavement.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and commitment today, and we've certainly got a lot of matters to think about here. So we will endeavour to have it on the website by close of business on Friday. If not, it would be Monday at the latest. But thank you very much for your time, and I'll now declare this planning policy meeting closed for today. So thank you all very much.